There's no doubt that streams become a huge, dare I say, massive part of internet culture in the past few years. However, I don't really watch streamers when it comes to content creation, because although I can sit down and watch a movie for about an hour or so, I just can't sit through an hour of watching someone trying to become the next big thing. Wait, that's that's literally what I'm doing. Anyway, this doesn't really apply to every single streamer out there, but it's kind of a pattern I've noticed in the recent times with the rise in more and more popular streamers. Well, except Speed, because he's actually kind of funny. ABC! But there are many more streamers out there that are loved by many people, such as Queso and that's all I got. But I can see why people watch certain streamers. Maybe it's because of their voice, personality, and even what they bring to the table when it comes to what they're doing.
I know how this works.
Even at a young age, a lot of people wanted to become content creators. Even myself. Well, it's kind of nice that I'm actually making a video on about, like, streamers, even though I don't really want to become a streamer all these years later. But, like I said, I don't think I'll ever become a streamer in life because, well, of many personal factors that I don't really want to talk about. But even though I don't want to become a streamer anytime soon, or maybe even later, I have actually thought about it from time to time when I was younger, and what it would kind of be like. But I don't really want to do or even become a streamer type of content creator. However, I have played a game that kind of encapsulates that incredibly well, and also just so happens to be one of my favorite games of all time in my top 15, called Needy Streamer Overload. Needy Streamer Overload, or Needy Girl Overdose as it's known in Japan, released in 2022 and is described as a psychological horror visual novel published by WSS Playground. And if you're a Touhou fan, you probably heard that name before, since they also helped release Touhou Lunar Nights, which is actually pretty cool. Right off the bat, the game has a pretty cute pastel, pixely aesthetic going for it, which in my opinion really helps in its favor when it's being based on somewhat early and modern internet culture. It's not exactly clear when the game takes place, but when you do open the game after the Windows boot up screen, it does say that it's take on modern day Japan. When you actually do start the game for the first time in any one of the 3 save files, you're introduced to Ame, a shut-in girl who desires validation from the internet and wants to become a famous streamer by gaining 1 million followers in around 30 days. Yeah, when it comes to her design, I honestly really like it about her. She almost has this really gothic with black and red, but also somewhat of a cutesy aesthetic with her small angel wings. And fun fact, her design is based off a subculture in Japan called Juraike. However, when it comes to you, the player, you're her producer. She calls you P-chan throughout the game, and no, you can't change it, even though I wanted to. And also, she even texts you about it, saying how she wants to change her name, but ultimately declines it because even she doesn't know what she wants to change it to. Before getting into the game proper, and my perspective on the game as a whole, among other things such as Ame and that, it's better to give some context on the game works and functions. On the left side of the screen, there's 5 things you can do. Me Too, which is where you are right now, and where you can stream. More on the streams later because I have a little bit to say about them, and they're probably one of my bigger gripes about the game. Hangout, which includes playing games or spending time together. Medication, which Ame can use to overdose on, which can lower stress but raise mental darkness. More on those 2 later. Sleeping, which ranges from sleeping until dusk and out till tomorrow. Internet, which spends time going on different corners of the internet. And going out, which just spend times around different parts of Japan. You also might have noticed that in my footage, it shows magicals rather than medication like in the original. That's because my footage is from the Switch version, rather than the PC version of this game. I don't know why it's censored since this game handles a lot of sensitive topics, but whatever. This is the only thing censored to my knowledge. This game has a time system that's pretty alright in my opinion, where the game is split into 3 different parts in each day. During the noon and evening, you're able to gather stream ideas for followers ranging from playing games, sleeping, and overdosing on medication, like I said earlier, to not only further the game, but also the time of day. However, at night, Ame becomes OMG Kawaii Angel, just Kanjo for short. Her official Japanese name is Chosen to Saikawa Tenshi-chan, or just simply put Ten-chan, which is Ame's streamer persona. A much more vibrant, colorful, and upbeat character contrasts her dark, slightly gloomy, and somewhat narcissistic attitude throughout the day. When you stream, your followers are able to go up depending on what type of streams you do. But those aren't the only things changing. On the right side of the screen with Task Manager, there are 3 other values that you need to control: stress, affection, and mental darkness. Stress is basically what it sounds like. It's how Ame feels throughout the game and is one of the key factors when playing it in my opinion. This can determine a multitude of different endings. Her basic limit is 100 like the other 2 stats. However, if you get your stress over 80 in any of the 2 days in a row, Ame begs for you to cut her and then you get 120 stress as your limit. Affection is how Ame feels about you. Yes, keeping it high is good, but keeping it too high or too low will result in an unfortunate early ending. And the last stat is mental darkness, which in my opinion isn't inherently bad. It does give you more access to medication Ame can use to overdose on throughout the game, and the more high the value is, the more medication you have to access to. And this can also determine different endings, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Speaking of the stress meter, I absolutely love how it goes in tandem with the music in the early game, specifically days 1 through 10. On the first few days when you initially have low stress, the music that plays is called Angel Stagnating. However, when the stress meter goes up, the music gets more frantic, going from Angel Stagnating to Angel Falling. Which speeds up the music halfway through, and then to one of my more favorite tracks in the entire game called Angel Breaking, which includes a scream at the start. Signaling Ame's mental state and the deadline to get 10k followers by day 10. You're able to do 11 types of streams shown here. The 12 are milestone streams, and whichever path you go down can dramatically change the game's outcome, such as Ame ascending to godhood and acknowledging a player, going to Galactic Express, or just as simple as gaining 1 million followers by the end of the month. Ame basically lets you control her life and what she does, if you exclude certain moments where she sleeps all day, doesn't want to stream at all, or when she wants to go out with you. A detail that I love about the game is the apps that Ame uses, such as Twitter, which is pretty obvious, even Ame still calls it that after all this time, Dinder, ST, which is I think 4chan, something similar to Netflix, and Jine, which is based off of Line, a messaging service in East Asia. Choosing streams is very important because it can determine how much her stress increases, affection lowers, or mental darkness increases. Stress increases for every stream except for the ones where she reaches her milestone, so beware of that. One of my gripes about the game is for a game called Needy Streamer Overload, the average streams don't really add much. They only do in certain endings. To me, they only give a little insight to Ame through her persona as K-Angel, but that's about it. The game already does this with K-Angel tweeting every day, and we are Ame's partner. We already know her from a private account, so through at least one playthrough of the game, we already know her throughout the game already. The only upside I can see is that when you remove the comments, you're able to reduce stress by about 1 point. 1! Compared to about, 10 to 20 stress points you get by every other stream that you do throughout the game. So I don't really blame them if you skip them. Also, there are times where Ame can just do whatever the hell she wants. This didn't really impact many of my runs since, I could just circumvent them by saves coming. But overall, this aspect is very, very small when compared to overall the much bigger game. This happened around like 5 times when I was recording footage for this video. And my last complaint is with one of the endings, introducing the flatline ending, where if you just ignore Ame for any time of day through her text, then Ame just gets up and leaves, giving you the flatline ending. This didn't really annoy me as much as it sounds because when you do streams, Ame sometimes does text you, also during the noon and evening like I just said. And sometimes, more often than not, you sometimes do those things and just don't read Ame's text, which kinda can ruin your run more often than not. It would be nice if, they decreased over time, but knowing how Ame is, it is kind of in character for someone like her. Thankfully, once you know about it, you can easily circumvent it by just reading Ame's text and starting the stream or doing whatever else during the day and evening. Speaking of the Flatline ending, there are 26 other endings in this game, but 2 aren't technically canon, and it can take a while to get them because they require many factors, while other just needs maybe 1 or 2 that are easily obtainable. These can be based off stress, mental darkness, and affection like I talked about before, and some even require specific follower counts to reach. Side note, I will not be talking about every single ending in this game, because in my opinion, that would kind of ruin the experience of an otherwise amazing game that I think people should really experience by themselves, rather than just watching 1 or 2 video essays and calling it a day. That's a little bit of a side tangent, but I'll probably talk about that when I get to Ame's character way later. Anyway, just like these streams, these endings can vary a lot, and more often than not, determine what life Ame leads at the end of that specific run. It could end with her living a normal life, her ending herself twice, her leaving the player for someone else, or her having many mental breakdowns. By far the rarest ending to get is the SMT ending. This can randomly happen during your run, specifically during the late game, and you need to have over 80 stress on your meter, but you'll be good, however you won't be guaranteed for the ending. My favorite ending to get, and one of the reasons I even made this video, is the internet overdose ending for several reasons. Firstly, it's common knowledge about you and Ame that you, the player, are in control, but in this ending, this power is straight up stripped away from you. To get this ending, you already need to have the mental breakdown stream. This can occur when the stress meter is over 80 in any more of the 2 days in a row. Just like when Ame begs you to cut her, this happens after that. And you need to have more than 80 stress on the 24th day or before. And what happens from then onward is probably the most depth ending to Ame and K-Angel as a whole, separating the streaming line and them fully merging, even though they quite literally are the same person. During the beginning parts of the ending, Ame talks about how she feels sluggish, relating to the fact that her stress is quite literally through the roof, which is backed up by one of her streams that automatically happens when you reach over 80 stress in any of the 2 days. Sorry, I didn't mention that earlier. She does a vanity search to see that it's just filled with hate. Even when she tweets, her replies are filled with nothing but hate comments. So she decides to do a stream where she informs her viewers about how she's doing, but eventually even those are filled with hate comments, and then she quickly ends the stream. This repeats for the rest of the days where she starts streams and gets hate comments. But on one stream, she ends up throwing up on camera, and her viewers start making fun of her for it. She even gets doxxed due to how bad the hate is getting, until she decides to start up a stream for the very last time. On day 29, she starts up a stream that's in gibberish. However, when it's deciphered, it reads, "Welcome to the Internet Angel stream," where K-Angel is shown holding up a picture of Ame with blood all over her. What I'm assuming this is implying, well, not even implying, it's just straight up telling us that K-Angel killed Ame, meaning she has lost herself into the internet and taken K-Angel as her actual real-life self now. I'm open to hear what you have to say about this ending overall, but in my eyes, this could be seen as people losing themselves, their real personalities, into the online persona they have created. It's an extremely nice but creepy commentary on how when it comes to streaming and content creation as a whole, people can easily lose who they are on the inside, and search for that fame by any means necessary, literally ending themselves in the process. Think about how many streamers you've seen, or hell, even content creators, who easily lose themselves in things such as gambling, trolls, the pursuit of fame, or even getting a bunch of hate comments like Ame. It's a really cool but disturbing look into the online content creation space that this game does masterfully. This ending shows that people do get absorbed into things like this, get pushed in a mental breakdown because they're way too deep into the internet without looking for any way to get help or to move away from it. There are way many more endings that discuss topics like this. Trust me, only 3 out of the 27 endings in this entire game are good for Ame. Only 3 out of 27. But anyway, keep this specific ending in mind for later. It's important when I get to talking about Ame's character because there's a lot to say about her. Speaking of Ame, what's up with her in all these endings? Or another note, why do people idolize her? Before I start this section, I want to make it very clear that I am far from a licensed psychiatrist. So if I get anything wrong about the symptoms associated with these mental illnesses or anything of the sort, Please tell me in the comments. As a character, I honestly really love Ame. There's a lot about her that we only know by going through at least one playthrough of the game, but let's quickly go over what we do know about Ame. She's an adult who moved away from her parents' house to quickly gain validation from streaming because, by her own words, she's not the smartest. And apparently it's the easiest way to get money. She's clearly been on the internet for a very long time based on the fact that she does stream on certain aspects of the internet that you need to be at least in a certain rabbit hole to teach others about those specific topics. She also makes references throughout the game such as salad fingers with rusty spoons and knows about certain nerdy places in Japan like Akihabara. She's clearly a girl who suffered from major issues and is put in a situation where you, the player, are in complete control of her every action throughout the game. In the manga Run With My Sick, Ame states that she suffers from bipolar disorder and manic depression, but in the game, it is heavily implied and shown that she suffers from borderline personality disorder. Although this isn't said, her symptoms and actions do align with a diagnosis of BPD, such as a constant validation, strong fear of abandonment, substance abuse, unstable emotions, intense mood swings, struggle of identity, impulsive behavior, among other symptoms. But I highlight these in particular since Ame displays most of the symptoms associated with this mental illness. Hell, her motivation to even become a streamer in the first place is a want of validation. Another symptom with her dual identity with Kate Angel, causing poor self-image and her mood swings displayed in text messages and on her Twitter account. These disorders explain a lot of the things that we see her do in-game and how she acts throughout it as well. This can also tie into her Jiraiya K design, which is known as the landmine type in Japan, which is known for its mentally unwell and borderline personalities, people who live either without their parents or on the streets, which does fit Ame's overall feel, attitude, and her actions, as the room could change to become more trashy in certain endings. When it comes to her relationships, it's pretty apparent throughout the game that her relationship with P-chan is very abusive, with her letting P-chan, which is you by the way, do whatever they want to Ame. Sure, you can help Ame and guide her to a better life at the end of the game, but you can just as easily and way more often make her into someone far worse than she originally was, with her having mental breakdowns and overdosing. It's also shown that she's gone through some type of parental abuse in her early life. It is shown throughout Needy Streamer Overload that Ame doesn't really have the best relationship with her parents, since they were both neglectful. When it comes to the game, there isn't really much we know about Ame's parental life, but she does bring up the fact that her mother is gone now, implying she either died or Ame has cut her off completely. In the manga, like I mentioned earlier, Ame doesn't like the fact that one of her fans, Noah, mentions her parents, and then around the next panel, we see Ame's mom from her perspective as a child, with her face blacked out. So even early on, we can assume that Ame's parental relationship, especially with her mother, wasn't that good. Unrelated, but the way Ame types may replicate those who have gone through abuse earlier in their lives, and may even replicate those who have been chronically online or maybe even young, even though Ame is in her 20s. I literally had nowhere else to put this, but I just think it's a nice reference to Ame's character as a whole. I don't think Ame even knows how to live as she says, because she basically wants you to choose everything for her. But she does know when to stop streaming when there's something like a breakdown stream or something like that. But she also does listen to you, or I guess that point is kind of invalid. I love Ame because she feels like a very real person with major unresolved flaws. She's written like that. In my eyes, you're not really supposed to root for her or want her to succeed. And that's kinda why I love her. The only reason she even wanted to start streaming in the first place is to gain validation, money, and fame from the only place she genuinely finds its Twitch's central comfort, the internet, and becoming famous to ensure that unneeded validation. In the ending where you just reach 1 million followers, near the end credits of that ending, she expressed her dissatisfaction with you, and her goal being achieved on her private account. And if you try and follow her, she just ends up blocking you. She loves the feeling of reaching a goal, but when she reaches it, she's ultimately dissatisfied with the heights that she's reached after all this time. I want to make this incredibly clear. Ame is not that good of a person by any means. She wants chaos rather than peace most people yearn for in their lives. She would rather spiral into a worse mental state than get help at all. The game even shows you this at other times. So does the ending where you can get cucked if you send her on too many dinner dates with the stream reading My New Boyfriend. Also an ending where she'll straight up leave you for trying to better her life, such as lowering her stress and mental darkness. She'll just get bored with you and leave, ending the game incredibly quickly. In another manga anthology series called Cho Tenchan, in one of the chapters, Ame is shown having a mental breakdown as she's told by P-chan to go to hospital, After making her own hate comments, this is why I simultaneously love Ame as a character, but don't really like her as a person overall. I love her because how real and raw of a character she's written, but don't really like her as a person, because her actions actively avoid her getting help such as therapy and lowering her stress. This also made me think about people tend to idolize characters like these. When it comes to these streamer overload is a bit odd to me from a meta-narrative standpoint. First of all, that's what the game is literally telling you not to do. Think about any streamer that's done bad things in their streams who actively do these bad things to get popular and nothing else. People just give them fame even though they just don't deserve that type of fame. It's kind of the same thing. Secondly, have you seen the things this woman has done and is capable of doing? Especially with how she acts during the game and in a number of different endings. She uses the people who love her, or the person that they think she is, as nothing but wallets to suck the money out of to do nothing but give her attention. So these actions that she does make her even worse of a person, because she knows what she's doing is wrong, but she doesn't do anything to change and or fix them. She doesn't really care about anyone in her chat. If they all died and were replaced, Ame just wouldn't care. She just treats them like words on a screen. But despite all that, I can see why people love Ame, such as myself, because she suffered from a disturbingly realistic disorder that people go through, and I have nothing but respect for that, and those who want to seek the help that they need. From what I've seen online, I can see people see themselves in Ame, whether it will be how she acts, to what she loves, and even the little things in how she types. Even I tend to type like she does, in all lowercase, just because I kinda like it. At some point in our lives, online and offline, we knew somebody like Ame. She is creepily realistic on how she acts, whether it be through her texts or posts, or even her mental breakdowns. For a character from a fictional game, she feels incredibly real and almost like an exact copy of a person I knew when I was younger. In reference to her idolization, there are people who don't like Ame not because of a realistic depiction of BPD, depression, and bipolar disorder, and what happens when someone is given a platform, and the stresses with content creation and the pursuit of fame, but rather just because she's pretty. Most of it from what I've seen is from TikTok talk about how Ame is such an amazing cutesy core character, which is technically true, but that's all they see her as. There's also another side to her mischaracterization. It's her being seen as nothing but a problematic, horrible, and possibly evil person. It may sound like that's what I've been doing in these early sections of Ame's character analysis, but I'm not. I'm making the point that her character is very realistic, but not inherently problematic nor evil. Far from it. Ame, well, through my eyes at least, is what happens when a person who doesn't have a good upbringing nor a good life with unresolved problems reaches for a goal that suffers from many pressures and influences that can drown out someone's true meaning as a person, due to the impact of being someone famous and doing bad things, because that's literally all she knows. Although my interpretation of her character isn't perfect, I do think it's more than a one-dimensional look at such a complex, raw, and real character such as her. If it's not already clear enough, I love Ame's character, but having her reduced down to nothing but a cutesy core character and or a problematic evil person who's being mischaracterized is just pretty bad to see, since her depiction is honestly amazing and shockingly real. People tend to post constantly about this game, whether it be through backgrounds or just talking about it in general, but I've never ever played a single minute of it, and are shocked when Ame isn't this perfect person after idolizing her for months and only do it because she looks pretty. Well, she's very pretty, but that's literally not my point. That's another aspect and problem theme about this game that isn't really shown all that much, but content creators aren't really your friends. You may know them at a surface level with what they talk about and post. My point is, they're doing what this game is telling you not to do, viewing her on such a high horse because of her surface level observations such as her looks and nothing else. I want to make this very, very clear when I do this short character analysis with Ame. I'm not villainizing her at all because of her mental illness. That's probably the last thing I would want to do with a character such as her, but I want to make the point that she suffers from major flaws in herself as a person. I don't think she's just a black and white type of character, but there are many factors that make Ame who she is, and her mental illness isn't what I want to focus on mainly when doing this type of thing, but what she does around it. Narila, the game's creator, even said that he doesn't want Ame to be seen as a problematic person, and I can see where he was coming from when I was playing the game for this video, since as I said before, I can see a part of myself in Ame, Does that make me a bad or problematic person? No, but like Ahmed, we do have our faults, whether it would be our upbringing, the people we hang around, or the influence and impact of the internet and its culture, which can drive people to do bad things. However, I want my dissection of Ame, no matter how short or long, to show that she isn't a good person, which may not be seen on the first playthrough. I mean, yes, she does some good things throughout the game, but overall, she isn't really the best person. I also want to spend a little bit of time talking about her attitude and Petite Game Collection, since it gives slightly more and somewhat different characterization when it comes to Ame, not only with the streaming life, but the way that she feels about it. Petite Game Collection at the time of this video released a little over a year ago, with 4 short games involving Ame and K-Angel. However, the one I want to focus on is a short game out of the 4 called Ame's Happy Happy Dating Game. It's overall a similar story to Needy Streamer Overload, you being Ame's partner and all. However, the dating sim aspects are slightly more fleshed out, rather than just being a small part of a much bigger game, and the streamer aspects just take a back seat. You can take Ame to 6 different places around Japan, but I want to go into detail about the hospital and her child at home, since they give her biggest characterization in those specific places. When it comes to the hospital, Ame seems a bit more relaxed and recognizes that she actually needs help, and notices the struggles that people go through in their daily lives rather than just brushing them off like her NSO counterpart does. She talks about how lucky she is to have someone by her side to help her out and where she would be without the things that she does, such as streaming. And her childhood home deals with the same sympathetic ideals. In the bad ending of the dating sim, she apologizes for how she treated her fans and how she uses them for money, how she doesn't deserve any of the fame that she has acquired when it comes to her streaming lifestyle. She's constantly doubting not only herself but her success, and the people surrounding her, which her NSO version does. However, she's self-aware of what she's doing and actively feels wrong and bad for doing what she's doing and actively apologizes. I know this video is mainly talking about Needy Streamer Overload the game, but I bring up these instances such as Petite Game Collection and these mangas such as Cho Tenshin and World of My Sick to not only give further context or insight, but even a different look at the same character from a different lens, which in my opinion makes Ame an incredibly interesting character to dissect. Ame from NSO, Ame from PGC, and Ame from these mangas are all Ame at the end of the day, but how these versions of these same characters are handled and go through make it nice to see how Ame is the same character, but would go through different genres and settings since each of these versions all go through similar struggles, yet different versions of those same struggles of becoming a popular streamer suffering from mental illness. With that out of the way, let's get back to the actual original game of Needy Streamer Overload. Seeing how Ame is or isn't able to handle what she so desperately desires at the end of the game is where the actual meat of said game comes from. Because, as I said before, the streams don't really add much. Well, besides certain streams like milestone streams, the final streams, and even certain streams like Netlore that can guide her to certain endings. Because, here's the thing, treating Ame right will result her in leaving you, while treating her poorly will have her stay, and even end up having an ending where both of you have a good time together, which is 1 out of the 3 good endings in this game. This is Ame's main problem throughout Needy Streamer Overload. By major flaws, this is what I mean. Her goal of reaching 1 million followers and of that validation clouds her view of herself and how to even treat herself correctly. Since in the ending Normie life, she quits streaming and goes back to school after being a middle school dropout. But in the manga Run With My Sick, she says that she's a high school dropout rather than a middle school dropout. I don't really know why they changed that aspect of her, but whatever, she's still a dropout nonetheless. Since all of these endings I listed are inherently bad, what is a good ending? Rather, what is the other ending that I'm actually talking about where you two have a good time together? The best ending for this category is Do You Love Me? In said ending, Ame tells you that K-Angel is capable of more things and begins tweeting on said account talking about going through a theme park with you, aka P-chan, and most of her followers being shocked that she has a boyfriend, but she really doesn't care. At the end, she tells her viewers that she's happy that she has gained 1 million followers. However, these endings are only a very small part of the game, 3 out of 27 endings like I said way earlier, and there are many other endings resulting in bad and even worse endings for Ame, which in my eyes fit the overall message and narrative of Needy Streamer Overload. Well, most of the endings show that these type of people don't deserve the fame that they desperately want, and giving them that fade will typically lead to horrible things, not only happening to them, but the people surrounding them. This is why I went into so much detail about the Internet Overdose ending. Not really because it's only my favorite ending, but because of one of the messages and themes when it comes to needy streamer overload. The hate and the pressure that can come from content creation can lead to unwell thoughts manifesting in people, and those thoughts can lead to manifestations becoming real through the action of those who want those to become bad people, creating an awful cycle which feeds in and out of itself, which create bad people who feed bad people. Besides the commentary on how streamer culture gives people who don't deserve the pedestal that they receive, and the pressure that comes with having a big name, and when they crack under pressure, people can become something that people either hate on in these reviews or just run you off the internet, I think there's a lot more here that gives insight into another narrative about needy streamer overload that most people might not see in a first playthrough, or a second playthrough, or even a 26th playthrough. Let me get to this point. I'm talking about the secret data zero at the end of the game when all the endings are completed by the player, excluding the 2 secret endings like I mentioned earlier, like way earlier, SMT and Happy End World. This save file, which I probably hid throughout the footage, opens another door and another part that makes us as one simple yet kinda complicated question about the psychological horror yet QT pastel game. Are any of the things that we see even real, or did they even happen at all? For a loaded question, I could theoretically have a bunch of answers depending on what type of ending you get, how you treat Ame, and a bunch of other things. In my opinion, it is a very simple one. Not really, except Data Zero, kinda, which, as I said before, is unlocked after completing every single ending except 2. SMT because it's random, and Happy End World because you need to unplug your internet to get that ending. Top 5 endings in my opinion. Throughout the game, we've been in, well, almost complete control of Ame, excluding the times where she just doesn't want to do anything. But in this ending, that power is straight up taken away from you throughout the entire run. And you see seemingly the real Ame do her best to become a true streamer without your help. I mean, yes, she does mess up sometimes, but at the end of the run, she actually does reach her goal of 1 million followers, and to me, is the canon ending of needy streamer overload. When Ame is all done with what she set out to do, she does leave the computer and you're able to access a secret document that Ame blocks you from viewing normally during gameplay with her webcam. This secret document reveals that you, P-chan, are fake, and you're a figment of her imagination, and that she'll just make a new one. Okay, I haven't been entirely honest with you when I initially described the game. This game is also Denpa inspired, a Japanese term meaning those who are disconnected from reality or disassociated from the people around them. Everything that you have been doing wasn't even you, or P-chan, it was Ame. P-chan is just someone Ame created as an imaginary person. This is sorta hinted at her Chat and Chill 5 stream, where she talks about having imaginary friends in pretty great detail. It's a pretty heavy bombshell that the game just drops on you at the end of the game. Besides of how good it is when it comes to the narrative, Ame doesn't really learn anything from this. My only problem with this ending is that she doesn't need P-chan to become a streamer, but she decides to make a new one, so what's the point? I guess it was a show that people can't change, and Ame's still a bad person even when we leave her, and she can never be helped. But even then, why does Ame say that she does need P-chan but go make a new one in the future? Although this ending is a little bit confusing, taking at face value, it is kind of in character for Ame to say that she's going to change rather than actually changing. With all that I've mentioned and this new information, what is the overall true narrative of needy streamer overload knowing that P-chan is basically Ame? Well, personally I think of it in 2 ways. On one hand, everything besides Data Zero is completely fake. The endings, drugs, followers, abuse, self-harm, among other things, are thoughts made up by Ame in her head replaying different scenarios. I kinda dislike this one, since dream and coma theories aren't really my favorite and are incredibly easy to make and can be molded to fit any different type of scenario. But I do think Data Zero is real. The other interpretation is that everything including Data Zero is fake and played by Ame, putting herself into a computer and simulating what it would be like to become a streamer. Her personality, her looks, and everything else put on the computer screen for her just to play with. I know Happy End World and SMT aren't really canon to get Data Zero, but I do think it's a way to show that the simulated Ame is gaining sentience. And this may seem like a massive stretch because it kind of is. The fake Ame screams during the SMT ending and her straight up going AWOL during Happy End World may show that this may be a simulation for the real Ame and fake Ame. Even some of Ame's glimpses into the real world shine through when doing Magic Candy. Also, the ending of Rainbow Girl, where she acknowledges the player or Ame based on what type of interpretation that you actually want to talk about. This can show that her consciousness is shared between both versions of herself. This can also be explained by the ending of Needy Girl Overdose, an ending where Ame asks questions about what happened during your playthrough, and when any of your questions are answered incorrectly, Ame literally stabs the screen after you answer a question wrong. Instead of just a black screen, we see Ame after she stabs it. With the knowledge that P-chan isn't even real, who is P-chan? Ame even questions who P-chan is throughout the logs you can get throughout the game. Well, you are P-chan, but going with the idea that Ame is running a simulation of herself, then that also makes Ame P-chan. Then that makes you Ame and P-chan. And since Ame is running a simulation and the Ame in the simulation reaches out to the Ame in the real world, then that makes Ame a higher person to the simulation and those outside of the computer. But that would also make you a higher being, which would make sense because you're playing the game assuming that you're Ame. This can get a little confusing even when I was playing the game. So in summary, you throughout the game are Ame, P-chan, and the player, who's basically kinda like God considering you control everything that happens throughout the game. Out of the two endings that I think is canon, even though I don't like, well, it's all in your head type of theories, I do think everything besides that of Zero is fake. Although there is a lot, and I mean a lot of evidence not even I can talk about, that supports the simulation theory. I do think Data Zero is the canon and real ending of the game, and saying it's all fake doesn't really make much sense to me. However, that's just my opinion, and you are free to disagree and tell me why in the comments. I honestly love to hear what you have to say about this game, because I don't really see people talking about the overall narrative of this game that much, besides like maybe one or two people on the internet. Wrapping this all up, I love how the game has ties into the real world. Kanjo has a real Twitter account you can follow, and Ame has one as well, but I doubt she'll follow anyone besides P-chan, real or not. Also, the art and the ads that you see throughout the game are, sometimes to my knowledge, real accounts you can go to on Twitter and find when the game was initially being released and people were asked to actually draw K-Angel. Pretty cool. And finally, Internet Overdose is a real song, and I don't think it's known as Internet Yamato. Overall, I highly recommend check out Needy Streamer Overload, as well as his other media such as Run On My Sick, Petite Game Collection, and Show Tenchan. Because I haven't really covered everything such as the endings because that would kind of ruin the experience, as well as the anthology series, even though I went over like one chapter of the entire 28 chapter thing. Since, as I said before, that would kind of ruin the experience for new players and fans. And I'm a huge fan of this game, as it tackles the consequences of a person who clearly suffers from mental illness, becoming enthralled with the internet and what you can gain, or more often than not, lose from it.